Okay, we've removed our resentments to the level God intended. They're replaced with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. We've removed our fears to the level God intended. They've been replaced with faith and courage. Now, I've got a storeroom back here in the back of my store, though, that's filled with guilt and remorse associated with the people I've hurt in the past. I'm going to have to start doing something about that, because that guilt and remorse controls and rules and dominate my thinking. And the first thing I've got to do with that guilt and remorse is to take an honest look at it, to really see the truth behind it. And it seems as though we human beings hurt each other more, faster, and easier in the sexual area than we do in any other way. And I think there's some valid reasoning behind that. Most of the other animals here on earth, they got the same kind of sex urge we do, so that they can reproduce themselves. But the difference in their sex life and ours is they don't have this thing called self-will. Whatever they do is on God's time. When it comes time for them to reproduce themselves, God usually signifies that by some physical change in the female of the species. The male senses the change, prepares himself, the two join together. And it's kind of like bang, bang, thank you, ma'am. And when it's over with, they normally go their separate ways. Not always, but usually. Now, you see, they don't think about having sex before they have it. They can't decide when they're going to have sex. That's on God's time. In most cases, they can't decide who they're going to have sex with. They can't decide whether they're going to have it with one or more sexual partners. And they can't even decide what position they're going to do it in. So therefore, you see very few sexual problems amongst the other animals here on earth. I've never seen a cow on a psychiatrist's couch yet talking about sexual dysfunction. We human beings are a little bit different. You see, God gives us that sex urge also, so that we will reproduce ourselves. But He gives us this thing called self-will. And we can make decisions about our sex life. You know, we can have sex every day of the year we want to, anytime. We can decide who we're going to have sex with. We can decide whether we're going to have sex with one or more partners. We can decide how many times we're going to do sex, providing we're physically capable of doing so. We can even decide what position we're going to do sex in. They tell me there's something like 64 different positions a human being can have sex in. I have no idea what they are. I only found 3 in my lifetime. And 2 of those damn near killed me. I'm not sure I'm going back to that. So what we're going to do here for just a few minutes this morning is we're not going to talk so much about how we do sex as to how we think about sex. Because how we think about it determines how we're going to do it. And that in turn determines whether it's going to hurt other people or not. And that in turn determines whether we're going to have to suffer the retaliation and the shame and the guilt and the remorse associated with those things. And I'm always amazed at how simple this thing is regarding this sex thing. Just a couple of pages to let you and I look at our own past sex life, see what we've been doing with it, see if we need some changes, and then how to go about making those changes so we can still enjoy sex, yet at the same time not hurt other people. Let's go to the bottom of page 68. Now about sex. God damn, don't leave, Jim. Hell, just a good part. I've known old Jim and Jewel forever, so I can get by with that.
Jim's going to get a cup of coffee.
Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. So easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. I've heard them all my life. They're the ones that say sex is a dirty thing, that you ought to do it in one time with one person, and the only reason to do it is to reproduce yourself, and if you enjoy it, it's a sinful thing. I've heard them as far back as I can remember. They are to the extremes on one side. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind, and they see its significance everywhere. You hear them today. They're the ones that say you ought to be able to have sex anytime you want to, with as many people as you want to, in any position as you want to, and you ought to be able to enjoy it every time, and if you don't, there must be something wrong with you. Maybe they call that the sexual revolution. Main thing I see wrong with it, it happened 25 years too late for me to participate in it. One school would allow a man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. And we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And I read that last statement with great relief, because I knew this book was getting ready to condemn me for what I had been in the past. I knew it was getting ready to tell me what I was going to have to do in the future. And I'd already made up my mind that I wasn't going to pay any attention to it at all. And I'm glad to find out we're not going to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We're not going to get into that question at all. You know, this book is meant to be helpful to anybody, anywhere. And if we start trying to tell people how to conduct their sex lives, what they can do and what they can't do, then surely we're going to start alienating people. Besides that, what is sexually acceptable in one part of the world may not be acceptable at all in another part of the world. So we're not going to get into that question. What we are going to do is see a way to review our own past sex conduct, to see what really is behind those things that we did, to see if maybe we can't shape a new kind of sex life in the future, where we can still engage in it, enjoy in it, yet not hurt other people. And primarily, that's all this is about. Joe?
So I don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct for sure, and I need an overhauling in that area when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to do what the book says, though. We're going to find the facts, and we're going to face the facts, and we engage in the process to accept the facts. And we're going to look for the ideas, the emotions, and attitudes, not necessarily how we do sex, but what we think about sex. Our ideas, our emotions, and our attitudes. In my case, my dad now, he's 3 years and 7 months and 13 days later, and a little bit later than that, he went off to California. And that left me and my four brothers and one sister at home with my mother. And I couldn't talk to him about it because he's gone. I got to be about 11, 12 years old. And I got to thinking about this a lot. I mean, a lot. Got to have a little brain damage from thinking about it. No one to talk to, so I finally went to my mom. I said, Mom, I've been thinking about sex. I'll never forget. Scared the heck out of me. Oh, my God, she said. That's a dirty, filthy, rotten thing to be thinking about, she said. And you ought to save it for the one you love. And she said the only reason you should have sex in the first place is to have children. Well, I figured that out right quick. She had 5 children. Then the thought came, well, no wonder my dad was in a nut house. So I went to school, and we had such education when I went to school, except they called it recess. I learned a lot of things out there. In West Tulsa, Oklahoma, in front of a place called the Jenkins Cafe, there was a bunch of wise, intelligent, experienced men and women who knew all there was to know about sex.
15, 16 years old.
Yeah, 15, 16 years old. They knew it all. And they were more than happy to share it with us little 11, 12-year-old kids. And some of those guys were telling me how often they were having sex with 2 or 3 different women a night, they said. My eyes got to be that big around. I like that. The fallacy of all this is this. I'm sober 2 or 3 years in AA before I figured out they were lying to me. Or at least I hope they were lying to me, you know. Because I tried to live my life based upon what I learned on the streets from people that didn't know any more about it than I did. You think I didn't need an inventory when I got here to find out what was right and what was wrong just for me? See, I had the spiritual knowledge of a 7-year-old boy, the coping skills of an 8 or 9-year-old boy, the sexual knowledge of a 11 or 12-year-old boy that I learned off the streets from people that didn't know any more about it than I did. See, I was mixed up in all those areas. I needed an inventory. Remember the first time I got married there in the beginning, I did real good for about 3 years, no problem. And one time I went out on my wife, and the next day I felt bad. I mean, I really felt bad. I didn't know you were supposed to feel bad, but I did. It's supposed to keep you from doing those kind of things, but it didn't. The next time it wasn't quite so bad as the first time. Then the next time it wasn't quite so bad as the time before. And then one day I woke up and it didn't hurt at all. And then I noticed something else. See, if you don't have any principles to live by, ultimately you won't have any reasons to live. And that's where I found myself in the end of my drinking. Charlie likes me to tell you the first time I had sex, I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and I was also alone. I don't think you want to hear anything from sex from me. So what we can do is do what this book is going to suggest for us to do, and we'll find our own way.
That's why he's wearing glasses today, too. Every time I say that, I look out there and half a dozen of you guys have jerked your glasses off and put them in your pocket.
Did you get that? You jerked your glasses off?
Okay. Let's look at the instructions now.
Moving right along.
We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Column 5. Whom had we hurt? Column 1. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Column 4. Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Basically the same set of instructions to look at our sex life as we had for resentments. So we just made up another little sheet, another little inventory sheet, called it a review of my own sex conduct. 5 columns. Who did I hurt? What did I do? Which part of self is affected? What feelings did I create in others? And where had I been? Now, I don't think anybody in this room has ever hurt anybody in the sexual area that we don't know just exactly who that is. That seems to be a form of common knowledge that we have. There may be some question about what do we do to hurt people in the sexual area. Of course, we hurt them in many ways. If I'm in a married situation, I go out there and have sex out there, and my wife finds out about it, then surely I've created a problem for her. If not physically, at least emotionally. If there's children in my home, and that sexual escapade out there creates a real rift between my wife and myself, and I've hurt my children too. If the lady I had sex with out there becomes common knowledge, then I've hurt her too. And if she has a husband and children, I've hurt them also. One sex act can hurt several different people. I think sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by simply demanding that they do with things with us sexually that they really don't want to. And rather than consider their needs and wants, we selfishly demand our own way. I think sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by demanding more than our fair share. Maybe our partner isn't too keen about having sex when we want to, and we selfishly demand they do those things with us when they really don't want to sometimes. I think sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by withholding sex. Maybe we're not too keen about having sex every time our partner wants to, and sometimes we will selfishly withhold sex when maybe we ought to give in once in a while. A lot of different ways we hurt people in the sexual area. I think we all know what they are. We just simply make a list of those people we've hurt through our own sex conduct. Column 2. What did I do to hurt them? Did I commit adultery? Did I force them to do something sexually they didn't want to? If we know who we hurt, we know what we did to hurt them. Column 3. Which part of self is affected here? Now, I think this might be one of the most revealing things we can ever do for ourselves. You would think if I hurt anybody in the sexual area, it would be caused by the sex instinct. And I guess once in a while, to get the physical, emotional gratification that comes at the moment of completion of the sex act, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing at the wrong time with the wrong person because of the sex instinct. But if I carefully look at each situation, I think I'm going to find that the other two instincts are involved just as much as the sex instinct, in many cases even more so. And sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. Now, I'm going to express an opinion. I want to be sure that you understand it's my opinion, not Joe's, not AA's, just mine. I am convinced today that God gave us the sex urge so that we could reproduce ourselves. I'm also convinced He made it a very enjoyable thing so we would do so. I just don't think you and I would do the kind of work involved in the sex act if we didn't get some kind of reward for doing so. Now, if we're doing sex for purposes other than reproduction or enjoyment, we just might be doing sex for purposes other than what God intended. Let me give you, for instance, we boys learned at a very early age that you can use sex to build your self-esteem. After all, the more members of the opposite sex you can attract to yourself, the greater man you really are, we thought. Now, we boys called that John Wayneism. I don't know what you girls called it. Jane Wayne, Joe said. But some of you girls tell me you use sex for the same purpose. Now, if that's what we're doing, that's not to reproduce. That's not to enjoy. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with that. Sometimes we use sex to buy a personal relationship. Maybe we're just lonesome. Want somebody to pay attention to us. We found out a long time ago that we can give sex and buy back a personal relationship. Now, that's not to reproduce. That's not to enjoy. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. Sometimes we use sex to buy material security. Maybe we're in a sexual situation we really would rather not even be in. We've become so overly dependent upon another human being for our material well-being that we give sex to buy back material well-being. Has nothing to do with reproduction or enjoyment. That's to fulfill the security instinct. Sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. Maybe our partner's gone out and done something they shouldn't do. And we say, we'll show them, and we'll go out and do the same identical thing. And the fallacy in it is after we've done it, we can't afford to tell them we did it. But there, we didn't use sex to reproduce or to enjoy. We used it to get even with another human being. Sometimes we use sex to force our will on another human being. Maybe our partner isn't doing what we think they ought to do. So we say we'll show them, we'll just cut them off at the pass, and we won't let them have any until they come around our way of thinking. Now, we boys aren't very good at that. We only last about 2 days. But you girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that. And I don't blame you. I'd do that too if it worked that good for me. You know, it's absolutely amazing if we really, really look at each one of these sexual things and see which part of self is really involved in it. And the majority of the time, sex doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. It's usually to fulfill the social instinct or the security instinct or to force our will upon another human being. 2 things happened to me in the 3rd column. First thing that happened to me is a lot of my guilt began to disappear. You know, I thought I was just a dirty, rotten, no-good SOB. But I found out that isn't true. That I use sex for purposes other than what God intended. Not because I'm a bad human being, because I'm a sick human being. And I used it to build my self-esteem and etc. The second thing that happened to me is a lot of the desire to go do it in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person began to become less and less and less when I saw the truth behind this thing. You see, I always thought and bragged that I was oversexed. No, I wasn't oversexed. Hell, I was undersecure. And I used sex to build my security and my self-esteem and etc. Now, I can't speak for you ladies, but I can speak for we men. And the majority of we men, 90% of our problems in the sexual area is simply this self-esteem thing. Trying to build our self-esteem, trying to build security, and etc. Very revealing information. Column 4. What feelings did I create in others? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? You know, not only are we looking at what we did, but we're trying to shape a new sex life in the future where we can still engage in it and enjoy it. What should I have done instead? I need to be looking at that too. Column 5. Same character defects. Where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been self-seeking, frightened? Where had I been inconsiderate of other people? And once again, I see the character defects out there in that 5th column. It causes me to do those things. That creates problems for others. At the very least, I'm going to have to start doing something about that personality in that 5th column. Because if I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, keep right on doing the same old things over and over, keep right on hurting people, they're going to retaliate, and I'm going to resent them for doing so. I'm going to be scared to death they're going to catch me, and eventually that's going to cause me to drink. So just like with the other parts of the inventory, this is step 4. This is the sex part of it. In the 5th column, we see the exact nature of the wrong. The sexual harm was the wrong, but what's the exact nature of it? What's within me that caused it? The exact nature of the wrong for step 5. I see the defect of character I'm going to ask to be willing to turn loose of in 6. I see the shortcomings in column 5. I'm going to ask God to take away in 7. And quite naturally, all the names in column 1 will be people I've harmed, and they'll come off of this sheet to be added to the sheet to be used later on for steps 8 and 9. We got everything we need now in the sexual area for steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And one thing that really surprised me is I kept seeing the same names in many cases appearing on all 3 sheets. I resented Barbara. I feared Barbara. Still a little bit afraid of her today. If she ever finds out everything I was doing some 36 or 37 years, she might file for divorce again. And I certainly hurt Barbara in this area. I even had the Internal Revenue Service on all 3 sheets. I resented them and I feared them, and I gave them a pretty good screwing before I got through with them, too. I better quit saying that. They may come after me someday. Okay, now we had prayer for resentments. We had prayer for fears. Now let's look at the prayers we have for the sexual thing, Joe.
We had 3 different prayers in the sexual area. He said, in this way, the way we just described, in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? First prayer. We asked God to mold our ideals and to help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex pairs were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. More prayer. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with others, persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
You know, this is an area that I don't think we need a whole lot of advice in. You know, if you go around and start asking people advice on a sexual thing, and you ask a half a dozen people, you're probably going to get a half a dozen different answers. You're still going to have to decide what's right and what's wrong. I think all we need to do is listen to that little voice inside ourselves. You know, I've never been in a sexual area yet that was wrong, that I didn't know it was wrong before I ever got into it. Didn't keep me from getting into it, but I knew it was wrong before I ever got into it. I think all we need to do is listen to that little voice inside, and I think each one of us know, you know, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, etc. Besides that, I can't think of a worse place in the world to get advice on sexual matters than Alcoholics Anonymous. A bad place to look for sexual advice.
Now, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we've done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and have learned our lesson. Now, if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. Now, to sum up about sex, more prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets a horny condition. No, excuse me. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would be heartache.